Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a phone wallet. Let's get started. So first of all, you need to measure your silicone phone case and then add 1/4 inch to the overall size and mark this onto your piece of paper. And then want to pop the silicone case onto your pattern and just draw around any aperture holes and transfer these to the back of your paper. You then want to mark 7/8 and repeat the same size as before and then cut this out. So this is going to be your base pattern, and then we're going to mark 2 extra bits, so you need one the same as the 2 bits we've already marked out, and these are going to be the inside panels. And then we need to mark one which is a minimum of 2 3/4 inch wide and the same length as your case. This is going to be where our credit card slots go. So once you've done all that, you can then start marking out from your patterns onto your leather. I am using 1.5mm shoulder. So once you have all your pieces cut out, you want to mark on the main case where the 2 inside panels will sit to, and then edge number 1 between those 2 slots, or those 2 marks. You then want to grab one of your inside panels and the smaller panel and place it on top, and you just want to mark where this sits. So mine is 3/8 smaller, so I'm going to then even that up with my dividers. You also want to mark 3/8 of an inch down the rest of that panel to make it a bit less bulky underneath once everything's stitched together, and you can then cut that out. With your divider still set to 3/8, mark along the bottom of that cutout, and then you can edge number 1 across the top of the tabs, and then again on the flesh side just down the long side. You can then number 1 edge around the grain of everything else. We then need to make a tab for our magnet to go on. So my magnet is 1/2 inch, so I'm going to make my tab 7/8 wide. And then we want to make sure it's got a nice round end on, so draw around something round and cut that out. So I'm now going to split mine. I want to take about 1/3 of the thickness off, and then you can number 1 edge the rest of this tab. So the reason I'm splitting it is because else it's going to end up a bit too bulky. So once you've done that, you can then stain and crease all your pieces. You then want to skive from that 5/8 mark all the way down to nothing on your sort of inner pocket. So we can then mark where our credit card slots are going to be. So we want to mark 3 1/8 up for the first one, and then they're going to be 3/4 of an inch apart, and we're going to have 3 in total. you want to make sure that you can have your slots 2¼ inches wide or long at least. So for that, I've set my dividers to 5/16, as this is what the size I need to be, and then draw them onto your panel and connect the dots with your set square. You then want to set your rotary hole punch to the smallest hole possible and punch your holes. So the holes go at the very end of these card slots, and it just basically stops the cards or the slots from splitting any further. And once you've done that, you can then use your knife and cut between the 2 slots along that line. And then once you cut them out, you can then stain in between. Once we've done that, we then need to mark a 2-inch strip of fabric and cut this out. Ideally, if you have crimping scissors to make sure the ends don't fray, use those. I don't have any. And then glue one end to your card slot. Pop your card in and then fold the fabric over so you know what length you need, and then glue the other end in place. So again, pop your card in and put it where you want it to sit, and then fold your fabric up around and glue in position. You can now glue your credit card panel to the panel where we cut the little tabs out. So set your dividers to your stitching width and then draw your line. We want this to go so it's 3/8 down from either end, and that's basically how far in our cutout is. And then stitch mark along this line. And double hand stitch in place. So we then want to fit the magnet in place. So the magnet is going to go underneath our credit card side, so make sure you mark it onto the right side of your outer case. And once you've marked where you want it to go, you can then use a sharpened screwdriver and cut the slots. And then fit the magnet in place. Once you've done that, you just want to glue a thin piece of leather over the back of that magnet, just so it doesn't catch on anything once everything has been sort of assembled. And we can now glue our credit card slots into our case. Once we've done that, we can then mark onto the case where we want our holes to be for the cameras. So roughly sort of mark that on. And then we want to do some samples before we actually do the main one, because we only get one chance of doing the main one. So do some samples to make sure you've got the right length and the right width sorted out first. I use a hole punch at either end for the round corners and then cut in between. So once you're happy, you want to just finalise where your aperture cutout needs to be and mark that onto your case. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to glue our panel, our inside panel, in, so we can basically cut the holes at the same time through both layers. This will just make sure that they're both in exactly the right place on both pieces. And then you want to cut out your holes. And once you've cut this out, you can then stain around the inside of this area. Then we can take the bits apart and glue our silicone case to its panel. So once you've glued it in place, you then want to stitch mark and stitch your silicone case onto that panel. Once it's stitched in, you then want to set your dividers to your stitching width and just draw a little cross on the corners of your phone panel side. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to put it in place and mark where it's going to be by putting an awl through that corner. This will be where we stop our stitching to, and it also means that we can line it up with both ends. So once you've done that, you can then mark between all your holes. And then stitch mark all the way around. You can then glue your panel in place. And we're then going to get the other side of our case ready for stitch marking. So again, with your dividers at stitching width, draw along the long edge, and then we want one stitch over the edge. So mark with your thumb where that will be, and then join the dots up. Once you've done that, you can then stitch mark all the way around this bit. And then we're going to stitch everything in place. Once we've got everything stitched in, we need to make the tab for our magnetic closure. So grab the circle end and hold it where you want it to be. You then want to flip the case around and roughly mark with your thumb how long you would like your tab to be. And straighten this up with your set square and cut it. You then want to fit your magnet into the sort of remaining part of that strap. And we're going to fit it as we did before. We can then glue the two halves together. And then we want to trim the ends and nick the corners, and then we can edge number 1 on that end as well. And I would suggest also staining the end at this point. Once you've done all that, you can then mark out and do your stitch marking. So once you stitch mark, we then need to put the tab onto our case to see where we're going to stitch to. So hold it in place and mark with your thumb roughly where it's going to sit, and then you need to mark a couple stitches back from the main stitch line on the case, and we're going to stitch between there and the same side on the other side. Once you've then stitched it, we can then pop our credit cards in place so we know how big it's going to be at its biggest, and then again put the tab on and hold it in place and mark out where it's going to be. And then skive the end of the tab down to half thickness and glue in place. So as you can see, I left my threads long on the tab, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all through that first hole, which is the last hole and what the bit is that I've already done, and put my needle through there. I can then continue stitching this tab as normal because I've now got my threads on both sides. So once you finish stitching your tab on, we can then do our finishing touches. So for that, we're going to sand all the edges of our phone case. This just makes it a bit easier to get nicer edges once we do our polishing. And then we're going to stain and recrease everything. And there is your finished phone wallet. That's the end of this video. If you liked the video, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more videos and tutorials, and make sure to hit the notification button to get notified whenever I post new videos. See you in the next episode. Skylar, what did you think of this week's make? Really?